Coming up on this edition of Safari ChangeMakers.
What if your safari dollars could help keep a girl in school, protect Madagascar's lemurs, restore fragile reefs, and change how rural families see children with special needs? In this special combined episode of Safari Changemakers, we go behind Time and Tide's lodges.
This is Safari ChangeMakers. Conversations with Africa's most innovative visionaries, the guardians, pioneers, and trailblazers, offering solutions to the most pressing challenges facing the continent. Over-tourism, human-wildlife conflict, the climate crisis, and environmental degradation. Conversations that reveal bold strategies for sustainable tourism leading to economic opportunities for indigenous communities while protecting local ecosystems and wildlife. Here's your host, founder of Artisans of Safari, recognized by Travel and Leisure and Condé Nast Traveler magazines as one of the top travel specialists for Africa, Karin Jones.
In this special combined episode of Safari Changemakers, we go behind Time and Tide's lodges. First with CEO Bruce Simpson from Madagascar, then with Foundation Director Elizabeth Ellis and Programs Lead Naonga Banda in Zambia. Together they show us how luxury safari travel can become something far bigger, a force for education, conservation, dignity, and long-term community change. How are you today, Bruce?
Fantastic, thank you. It's a great place to be speaking to you from. So I'm up in the northwest of Madagascar. We've got a smaller lodge called Sarakomba. It's one of two properties we've got in Madagascar. Across on the northeast, we've got Mirvana, but Sarakomba is a small 8-room lodge in Nosy B, which is one of the tourist areas in northwest Madagascar.
What has brought you to this place?
From a time and tide perspective, we are in Zambia and the story of Zambia, and I think that just looking at what is around us, I say us, the business where we operate, education, just the lack of female empowerment, healthcare requirements is so much in need and so obvious, and that's where the natural draw was, and that's where our foundation started putting time and effort into it. In a place like Zambia, there's some phenomenal conservation organizations, and instead of going and trying to take that on and do that as well, where there was a huge lack of effort and focus was in the communities. And in Zambia, where 60-70% of girls drop out of school, in Madagascar, there's very little schooling in some of the rural areas that we operate in. That aligned with some of the lack of facilities, hospital facilities, or just primary healthcare. And so we found ourselves moving into this area because that's who we are, that's what we believe in, and that's where we found the partners or the stakeholders in these areas we operate, where they needed help. I think a lot of people, have in the past, said they're doing things, sort of talk the talk, not walk the walk. And one of the things I found in Time and Tide was what they say they do, they're doing and more. And it's a foundation that I'm really proud of, and I'm proud to be part of, because it does stand up for exactly that. They really get in, and they've made a huge impact in these areas we operate.
When people think about going on an African safari, they're thinking mostly about wildlife. They don't necessarily understand until they get to Africa that there's really more going on. Have you found that to be true?
You spot on. If people come to Africa, or they come to the wildlife areas of Africa to see game, what they find when they get here is that it's a whole lot more. Without jobs, without education, without opportunities, the local communities need to survive, and so they either overfish the waters, or they poach the game, they cut the trees down for firewood, for building, they destroy habitats that would otherwise be the beautiful areas. What ends up happening is that companies like Time and Tide and many others are partnering with the communities, where they are education by virtue of providing jobs. With jobs, there's a greater understanding and a need for protecting these wildlife areas, And that, it's about sustaining a job and an income and a opportunity to look after your family and more. And in that, you protecting the areas. Is it a reason why people come to Africa? I don't believe so yet. It's part of our responsibility to make sure people are aware of the needs in these areas we operate.
Madagascar is a place within Africa that most people dream of, other than lemurs, whether they totally connect Madagascar to Africa.
It's an interesting sort of why Madagascar. I think that, just purely from a tourism point of view, there's a lot of tourism around the coast. Here where I am in Nosy Bay, a lot of people come to the coast. They come on a beach holiday, and that's about snorkeling, it's diving, it's fishing, it's meeting the local cultures, and it's having fun time on the beach and in the sun. What Madagascar's got to offer, however, is so much more. The biodiversity of Madagascar is just incredible. So we all know the lemurs. We've all seen the movie in Madagascar. We all know that there's the scary thing called a fossa. We all know that things are different here. Nosy and Cow, the island that Miyavana is on, is a conservation project. It is a project where we have taken out all the invasive species of plant. We've replanted over tens of thousands of endemic plants that we cultivated in the nursery. And the success there is that birds coming back is the first thing. Birds, insects, reptiles. Madagascar and the island that we operate on has got a chameleon that is the size of your forearm, but also the smallest chameleon in the world, which is not even the size of your pinky nail. And that occurs on the island. And with looking after this island, these reptiles, they breed and they proliferate and they succeed. There was poaching of a certain species of lemur on the mainland, a crowned lemur, and there was a lot of poaching, and there was a point where I think it was over 60 animals were found on the way to the restaurant trade. And so we worked with government, and we said, look, if we go and capture the remaining population in this specific area, this national park, we will reintroduce them onto Miyavana. We will protect them. In the meantime, since then, we've been looking at that same forest, and we've been monitoring and patrolling it and protecting it from any further poaching. And any excess animals or lemurs on the island, as they breed and are successful, we've got an agreement with government where we'll go put them back into this forest, which hopefully by that stage, poaching has become less and less and less and less. It's very, very much part of who we are, our DNA, the opportunity, but it's part of the journey that the guests come to see. So one of our islands in the atoll is a nesting site for terns. And when we started, there must have been about 25, 30 terns. People used to poach them for the eggs, for the small chicks. If you go there in 2 months' time, you'll find nearly 75, 80,000 terns just by protecting, the poaching of the eggs, etc. And that's what a luxury tourism product like Miyavana can support in the environment. And I guess that's why we're there. That's what we do.
I actually had no idea that lemurs were being poached. So are those like lemurs thriving now?
Absolutely. Yeah. They're breeding. But the nice thing about it is there's education around the animal, the species. There's 110 or 109 or maybe a few more species of different lemur species. But some of them are less than 100. There's so much more in Madagascar. The culture of Madagascar is just so spectacular and so amazing. Also, the people. People come onto the island. We got schools on the island. We got the girls' clubs on the island. We got the social outreach program on the island. Our girls' clubs are very much about female empowerment and teaching, investing in themselves.
Talking a little bit more about Miyavana, you've launched a large-scale coral restoration, and I understand you've issued fishing cards to nearly 300 local fishers. So people need to fish, right? How do you balance that?
The balance comes through influence. At Miyavana, we do not import any food at all. What we do is we collect it locally. So we either have gardens or we buy locally. We buy from crab farms. We've encouraged people to protect the crabs to get to a really big size, and we buy them from them. So rather than eating all the small little crabs and that's all they have, they look after them. We buy the big crabs and they make more money for their crab. And that becomes a business rather than just a resource for themselves. Exactly the same thing with some of the fish species, but we want to determine the size. The size obviously is part of the education, but also what we're looking for. So the whole thing is a journey for us where it is a combination of the commerce of it, the survival, just this subsistence need, and then the protection. We're not going to do it alone. We work strongly with the Ministry of Environment. We work strongly with NGO organizations that are out here helping and supporting. And we just play our role because it's a collective.
When, for example, you want to have a conversation with the fishermen, how does that happen?
We'll sit under a tree and we'll have the conversation with the respective leaders in this fishing organization, and they will act on behalf of the fishermen. The elders of the village get involved. The mayor, which is sort of the chief, it's an elected position, so the senior sort of statesman in the village or in the region would get involved, and it is constant conversation with these people being the fishermen, the community, ourselves, the operators.
Under a tree. If you could ensure one lasting legacy from Time and Tide's Foundation's work beyond the remarkable outcomes you're already documenting.
It's not a short game. This is a long game. The fact that we have a foundation, and which is not our core business, one has to be absolutely committed, because you can't just go paint a school and think a school's going to run. You have to put teachers and running water and lights and food and desks and and books, and then you will run a school for the duration of a child's schooling. You're in it for the long game, because these programs are only as successful as the energy that the sustained energy into the program.
I think we could talk more about this, but I know it's getting late there. Thank you, Bruce.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
The foundation story doesn't stop at Madagascar's turquoise waters. Its roots run deep in Zambia, where Time and Tide's safari camps in South Luangwa and the Lower Zambezi sit alongside some of Africa's most extraordinary wildlife corridors. I'm joined now by two remarkable women, Elizabeth Ellis, director of the Time and Tide Foundation, and Naonga Banda, who leads on-the-ground programs in Zambia, Madagascar as well.
We are based in Fuwe, that's in the eastern province of Zambia.
But you also spend time in Madagascar as well?
Operations are run from Zambia. That's where we would call like our core offices, what would be termed as a head office in some NGO spaces. And then we have a program officer leading our programs on the ground in Madagascar with oversight from us. So the senior management team is based in Zambia.
Can you share a little, both each one of you, of like your personal journey that drew you into community empowerment and conservation?
I come from a background of ecological research in the region, but my academic background is in anthropology. And so when Time and Tide was coming together and the founders resolved to have their own nonprofit foundation, it was a kind of natural change for me to move from the more of the scientific research side to kind of human focused programming.
And Naonga, tell us about your journey.
So I started my career 15 years ago. I have a background in sociology, and I've always worked in the nonprofit space. I've worked in livelihood programming, programs focused on agriculture as well as health, specifically HIV. But my passion has always been education and empowerment. And for me, working in remote rural areas also has a personal touch. My father was born and raised in a remote rural village, and for him, education was an escape out of poverty. And so he inculcated that in us. So I always wanted to give back in remote rural spaces in this kind of work that we do, and just the satisfaction that comes from creating those pathways out of a cycle of poverty.
And so in Zambia, you run girls' clubs that have achieved an extraordinary transition rate to secondary school.
The Girls Club is part of our female empowerment program. In Zambia, there are a lot of barriers with accessing education for girls. Mostly these are barriers that are based in cultural beliefs about the value of girls and women. So these are groups that have been traditionally marginalized. And so there's a lot that girls go through, early marriage, early pregnancies. Families are more willing to support boys than girls.
Yeah.
And so the dropout rates for girls is quite high in Zambia. Only 35% of them make it to the end of school. And those are some of the barriers that they face. So programs like the Girls Club is meant to identify the girls that are most at risk of dropping out of school. And through these clubs, we provide extracurricular support, helping them with sexual and reproductive health education, literacy, which is key for them to progress to secondary school, self-esteem lessons so that they're able to overcome those barriers and stay in school. And at the same time, we're also doing awareness in the communities, talking to parents so that parents can also appreciate the value of a full formal education and changing some of those mindsets.
I'm really curious if you can share, a story from Zambia that illustrates kind of that ripple effect of the women's transformation.
Yeah, sure. I can give you two. I can give you a story of a young lady. So like I said, these girls are identified as at risk of dropping out of school. So the schools in the rural area setup are characterized by lack of teachers, lack of quality education, just lack of infrastructure for any kind of quality education. And so within these schools, we're identifying those girls that are at risk of dropping out of school. So these are the girls that are failing, the ones that are shy, they're not speaking up in class, and their attendance rate at school is quite low. So just for me to explain what we mean by when we say girls at risk of dropping out of school. So we are already seeing the first cohort of girls that were on the program went on our sponsorship program, because linked to the Girls Club is a sponsorship program where we support these girls to have a higher quality education in better secondary schools in bigger towns from the rural areas that they live in, to access better quality education. So the first girl on our program is currently in university, which would have never happened if these programs were not in play. Yeah.
To add to that, so that girl, Afinia, is that who he is? Yes. Yeah. So she comes from a family of over 30 children. Her dad has multiple, there are multiple partners, and so there's over 30 children, which was one of her at-risk characteristics. So for someone like Afinia, it just never would have happened. There's too little to share amongst so many. But she was, with that extra support, she was a star student. She was the top performer in her class at secondary school, scored the highest marks on her exam, came and interned with us, got accepted to one of the top universities with a full bursary from the government to cover her school fees. And then we supported the other costs, and she's thriving. And so someone like her, there never would have been a possibility to identify her talent and potential.
More Safari Changemakers after this.
Safari ChangeMakers is brought to you by Artisans of Safari. Beyond the map lies adventure. With nearly 40 years guiding travelers into Africa's hidden sanctuaries, we craft journeys as individual as your fingerprint. Expertly designed, deeply personal. Connect with Karin at artisansofsafari.com for your collaborative consultation. Your safari, your story. Artisans of Safari.
For people coming to Africa, then how does this relate to their safari?
I would firstly just clarify that we both see ourselves as fully in the tourism industry. The nonprofit foundation that has been established within Time and Tide is part of its ecosystem. It's part of its operating model. But there would be no Time and Tide Foundation without Time and Tide. When you're operating in areas where the needs are so high, it is a responsibility as a private sector player to do more. You can't just have a lodge and a few staff and offer a wonderful experience to high-paying guests and be able to call yourself a responsible, mindful operator. Time and Tide resolved to establish a different function. They also realized, but this is not our skill set. We're in the hospitality sector. We don't understand how to drive value creation for local stakeholders beyond offering employment.
Yeah.
So let's resource ourselves with a team of people coming from a variety of different expertise. Our team is full of psychologists, social workers, education experts, people in the special needs space. Let's resource ourselves with a team of people that focuses exclusively on this work. Some guests, we offer what we call community excursions, where some of the Time and Tide Foundation team will accompany guests and their guide to meet our stakeholders locally, and we let the stakeholders explain what change has meant for them and why it's been valuable.
Do you see some of these individuals becoming leaders in their communities?
Yes, definitely. So there's definitely a ripple effect in terms of how the social programs create value. When women are empowered and they have an income, and we've seen this in our program, not just for the girls, but also for the women, and families of children with special needs are reporting a higher income. For us, that is an indication that there is less dependency on natural resources. We've had a few graduates out of our tertiary education sponsorship, and the way our cultural and social makeup is in this part of Africa is that when one person in the family succeeds and they're having an income, they'll invest back in their communities, they'll send money back home. So those sort of multiplier effects in the long run.
And that reinvestment isn't just financial. So when people, it is part of the kind of African communalist society that when one person gains, it is their duty, it is their cultural obligation to share that. So that comes also in the form of knowledge. We've seen mothers, for instance, mothers of children with special needs on our program, when their children has had a developmental change and they've understood their own ability to influence positive change, then they become the caregivers. We've had parents go become education champions in their communities. We've recorded people in their communities deciding to go back to school because the parent of a sponsored child of one of ours decided to encourage them.
Regarding natural resources, can you explain that a little bit more?
The number one threat, the threat of deforestation is quite high. And part of that is because Zambia actually has quite a lot of forest still. Clearing for farming, taking those resources for general home use, for sale.
For certain species that it would endanger them.
Yes, there are other pressures. There are the direct pressures on the species as well as the kind of the poaching that happens in the area too.
I would like to see our tourism dollars are making an impact in a way that will help you.
That's where those social return on investment analysis can be really helpful for people to understand the power of a dollar. Every $1 invested leads to a social return of over $20. And that is why visiting and traveling in this part of the world is inextricably linked to this non-financial value creation. These expensive safari lodges, I was talking about it recently with some of our team, because you see the figures, what these lodges are charging, and people just think, oh my gosh, somebody's getting rich at the end of this. And it's
right.
Actually the opposite. It's actually the opposite. A lot of these places, they operate at a loss. It's very hard. They're very expensive to maintain. But the return, the social return on spending your money here is powerful. And for example, why supporting a child with special needs developmentally in this part of the world means something different.
In Zambia generally, and more specifically in more remote rural areas, there's a lot of stigma and discrimination around special needs. And this is just rooted in lack of information about the biological causes of disability. So a lot of beliefs around witchcraft. And where there's stigma and discrimination, there's also isolation. when we started, schools were not willing to take these children on. The parents themselves, to start with, were hiding these children in homes because of that stigma and discrimination. So these children are very isolated. Many times the parents lack the support to manage these children. They do not understand. So our program responds to that by training parents, training communities, creating community awareness, to educate people on the biological causes of disabilities. And we have quite a team of volunteer community caregivers who go out in these homes supporting the parents. And we have seen more and more children being integrated in schools. When we had started the program in 2016, only 10% of the children were in school, children with disabilities. Today, over 70% are in school, which is a huge accomplishment and a testament to just the effort that has gone in terms of shifting those beliefs. It's also amazing to see just how children are able to reach these developmental milestones. We also link them to medical support services, so proper diagnosis, or the tools that they need to meet these milestones. And we've seen even unintended outcomes. When children are in school, mothers are freed up to do income generating activities. And the parents are reporting increased income. 95% of parents at the end of the program, when their children are graduated off the program, are reporting better emotional and social well-being. So
That's amazing. Have you seen the light bulb kind of go off with parents, like where they really didn't understand special needs and then it changes?
We have many stories, many stories of this is how I experienced disability. That a child was hidden. I was ashamed. I couldn't go to church. I couldn't do all these things. But with the help and the support, they understand the cause of the disability. They are willing to have their children sit, because it's also the fear. They don't trust that anybody else will be able to look after their children. So it's not from a place of they are a bad parent, but because of the stigma and the levels of discrimination, they don't trust that they can leave their child at the school away from them for so many hours. But because of the, the knowledge, the information, the support that has gone in, they are seeing the benefits of actually having the child in school. The child is learning, they have social interaction with their friends, and they are also free to do other things as well.
I was just going to add that a number of parents would have also sought help from medical professionals. And in our areas, the medical professionals, I mean, that's like who qualifies as that term is also, I think, a little bit liberal, but they would have been given misinformation, they would have been judged. And so they felt, with mothers who feel fundamentally, this is my fault, I've been told it's my fault. Either that's a socially someone has said, this happened to you because you did this thing that was socially, some kind of socially undesirable behavior, and this is your punishment. So there's kind of like a divine punishment side of it. And then others will have received information from healthcare providers or from people at clinics, which is just false. You're not feeding your child, and therefore your child isn't developing. And so we meet sometimes these like really round little kids, and they're like, well, I'm just trying. I'm trying because this is what I was told. A lot of the kids, I mean, especially children with cerebral palsy, we have quite a high percentage of children in our program with cerebral palsy. And what development and learning looks like for them at an early age in terms of motor skills, ability to crawl, ability to walk, is different sometimes than their other children or other children that they've seen grow up. And the thought is like, well, it's not possible. My child will never walk. My child will never crawl. And it's amazing how resourceful the caregivers that we train on these programs, they get, empty jerry can, a broken tire, and they help parents help their children. Okay, if they can push this is the first step to crawling, or they can use this, and they make I've seen twigs and they tie them up, and is like kind of walking bars to help kids walk. And I think when parents see, It's not that they can't, it's just they're learning in a different way. And then they feel empowered. And we have these care plans for children on the program. The parents are, so they can track progress and they feel like, whereas before they felt helpless. I don't know what to do. Something has happened. My child is bewitched. There's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
Now they feel they can take this hands-on approach to, I can see development happening. And if I can see it happening, and I know it's working, I know my child is going to be okay. And then they want to volunteer and help other families with children and speak out about it. And was so different, Karin. In the beginning, it was like, getting parents to even admit they had a child we went door to door, like looking for them because we'd heard from stakeholders, there's a problem, there's an issue here, you have to help. So we said, okay, well, let's look into it. And we had to go door to door and ask other children. They were the tattletales, like, that's changed. And then, as Naonga said, there's this high percentage of children in school, but like that also wasn't easy because it was years of getting with mothers to a position where the mothers feel it's safe for the child to go into school. So we were like, yes, okay, great. But we get to the school and teachers like, well, I'm not teaching that child. Other kids, I'm not eating with that child. I can't sit next to that child. Other parents taking my kid out of this school if that child is in. And then there's that whole journey we have to go on of educating parents. It's like, it's years and years of effort to get, the 10% to 70% that Naonga referenced. Like, don't underestimate the pain of that shift.
That 70% is huge. How much time do you think people need to fit in some time to have a chance to see your programs?
The community excursion, we try and kind of touch on a few different stakeholders to give a kind of holistic perspective. That's half a day. Yeah. What we typically see is that guests who are staying with Time and Tide for 5 or more nights are more likely to take up the opportunity to go on a community excursion. And they'll visit the bush camps or some of the bush camps, and they'll end up at Chinzambo. And by that point, they've seen so many wonderful wildlife encounters and all the species they've ticked off their list. And so now they're interested to kind of do something else. And I do want to underscore that all Time and Tide guests, built into their fees is a contribution to the foundation, whether they like it or not, they're contributing. So we like to make sure that they understand that. So sometimes we'll go over for tea and chat to guests and just make sure that they know that. And so you don't have to actually see it, meet our stakeholders and understand the programs to have a positive impact. You're doing that just by actually traveling with Time and Tide. I am so inspired from talking to both of you women. Thank you so much for the work you're doing there.
Thank you, Karin.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Well, that's our show for today. Subscribe on YouTube and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Till next time, I'm Karin Jones.